oftentimes dragons can be underwhelming, but they really shouldn't be. So in this creature feature, we're going to explore why so many dragon experiences tend to fall flat so that we could avoid those pitfalls. And then we're going to highlight some of the cool things about dragons that can really make those experiences truly incredible. So stay tuned as we do a creature feature on dragons.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another J&J tabletop video. My name is Jake, and with me, as always, is Josh. And Josh, when we talk about dragons, I mean, especially in 5th edition, they're kind of all the same in a way. I mean, yeah, they have like different flavors, right? You got your fire dragons, your poison dragon, your ice dragon, you know, acid, all that fun stuff. But really, you're just kind of subbing out the breath weapon, the resistance, and a little bit of a different environment is really what's going to fuel what you decide to use in your game. But they all have multi-attack, they've got frightful presence, they've got a tail attack, and really the way that the DMG will suggest adding some spice and flavor to them is we just give them some spells. And I mean, obviously there could be much worse ways of doing that, but I think if we're going to go beyond some of the combat suggestions and things, there are ways to make a dragon just shine so much more and just such a much more meaningful experience at the table.
But especially in like older editions, dragons were full casters, but YouTube is just littered with that single piece of advice that, oh, make them a 9th level spellcaster, and then, you know, your dragon fights will be totally different.
Yeah.
And I guess that's true, but I think we could take a step further and do better. Our friend Lee, This Crits, he actually did a video a while ago, I think it was a year or two ago. He mentioned in it how they've been a little simplified for 5th edition. A lot of things have been simplified in 5th edition, and that's a good and a bad thing.
Yeah.
At the same time, right? He also talked about dadskep. I'm just going to leave that as if you know, you know. How about this? If you know what dadskep is, then put it in the comments.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be so proud of you if you do, honestly. Yeah. But definitely check out Lee's video because it was a lot of fun. He had some great ideas for spicy dragon abilities. I think we're going to get a little bit more into the lore and just how to make dragons exciting, regardless of what type of dragon it is.
Fizban's Treasury of Dragons obviously had some really good stuff going on there, and it's honestly been a year or two since I've looked at it. I mean, do they really need more? I mean, like, just as a community, I just kind of get the sense that I'm not sure we use them well, and it just feels kind of like a leadership thing for me, like, and whether that's content we consume, and I really, when I say that, I don't mean to like put any show down or like a YouTuber down. I just kind of wonder, like, you know, some of the modules that we've played, Josh, we've played too. We're most known for Dragon of Icespire Peak and Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. So there's also some like game designers things here that it just feels like there's a lot of examples of dragons out there that just aren't good.
It's specifically, I'm thinking of modules, right? I'm thinking of Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, where the dragons are just kind of thrown in there as like this Mad Libs style of monster. You know, it could be literally anything else, and it wouldn't matter. Part of that problem is wormlings, right? You know, it's a wormling or a young dragon or anything like that. And when you're fighting such a weak version of something that's always seen as this massive, incredible, gargantuan beast, it's like a watered down experience. And especially in 5e, right? And this might have been the case in other editions. I can't really speak to them. I don't think it was because of stories I've heard, but largely in 5th edition, people just don't play high level games. So most of the time when players are talking about their dragon experiences, they're talking about fighting a young dragon in Icespire Peak, which you made fun, or fighting a wormling, you know, and that's just not doing the dragon justice. And that's just how they're presented in official material. The other thing is just the way you play dragon. I'll say dragons know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two, right? I think I've gone to that well for that joke too many times, but it works. It makes sense.
It absolutely fits.
But they're a dragon, maybe if it's young or if it's a wormling, it will. But in most cases, dragon is not dumb enough to just land in front of the party and fight with them. Maybe for a second, like to try to just trick one of them into trying to jump on your back or something like that so you could fly away with it. Maybe for a moment, but it largely is going to be a very smart and tactical fighter, and it's just going to pick off your players one at a time if they can. It's going to attack and fly away. It's going to be out of range for your spell attacks, and because they know what they're doing.
Yeah. So combat tips and discussions aside, I think truly what makes the dragon great, especially when you consider just how central and core they are to not only Dungeons and Dragons, but like just great stories out there. I mean, I recently watched the Hobbit trilogy again, and Tolkien just did such a great job with Smaug. And I think the key of it really is leaning into the story of the dragon. They're epic because the stakes are epic, especially if you're going to look at them as some kind of a boss fight or just this gigantic, big, looming threat in the area. When you compare Dragon of Icespire Peak with Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, one did that a lot better than the other. You mentioned earlier that you liked some of the tweaks that I made to Icespire Peak. And one was just that the orcs look a little malnourished because Cryovane drove the orcs away from their home, and they're just figuring out that whole lifestyle change, how that works for them. But that was something that I had to think about a little bit deeper. So let's just start how Dragon of Icespire Peak started. That whole thing prompted by Cryovane choosing a new Lair. I mean, obviously, if you're going to have a fight, the Lair actions is really what is going to separate them, especially if you're going to use them as a solo monster. You really don't want to leave them so far behind in an action economy fight. So the Lairs are very important, but I want to dig into that more. Why did this dragon choose that as its home? And that's the question. I think you can personalize it. Is it like it's a black dragon that just so full of their own hubris that they found this flooded, sunken temple to a god, and so when they take up residence there, it's just this stake of dominance that's like, this is my home. I am better than a god. I mean, what is more dragon-like than that? They believe they are the most powerful and most important creatures around, and so their lair should reflect that.
Yeah, and it's a fun opportunity for world building and for your lore dumps. If you have this ancient city, this ancient temple or something like that, you're able to explain to your players the story of whatever god or whatever people used to live here or anything like that. Did the dragon drive them out? Did they just find it empty and took it? Like there's
do they have a personal previous encounter with that god, and so there's a little extra like, this is my home now, nerd, I got you.
Yeah. Or was this temple created? Is this lair something that was created for the dragon? They were once worshipped as a god.
Yes.
People were sacrificing things to it or anything like that. And then they stopped, and the dragon, they put up with it for 100 years or so. And then, they decided, you know what? You people don't respect me like you used to. I think all of those things should matter, right? If the dragon pushed people out, that should matter. And that's what you're talking about with the orcs, right? Now suddenly the orcs are descending upon Phandalin or Phandalin, and they're
Skull
causing, they're causing all sorts of problems because they're displaced from their home. Definitely pay attention to the regional effects. Every dragon has its own regional effects, and all of them should be used. If this is a dragon that's been there for forever, and we were talking about black dragons, right? Within 6 miles of the lair, there's a lightly obscured fog. How
this is Dagobah, baby.
Yeah. But think about your fantasy world, and you're talking about Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, Two Towers. You have Merry and Pippin are trying to run away from the orcs, and then they see the woods, and I forget the name of the woods, but they're like, oh, not only a fool would go in there, but they do it, and world building and lore and all of that. Like, what does it mean when there's a lair here, and now there's, for a 6 mile radius, there's fog, and it takes twice as much effort to traverse because the plants are thick and twisted, and it's swamp, and it reeks, and water within a mile of it is essentially poison. Like,
oh yeah,
it's those things are huge, and at every level of play in D&D, it has an effect. You know, it means something to the people who live there.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about the lifespan of a dragon, before they're even an adult, it's like 100 years. I mean, you're talking basically very similar lifespans to elves. You hit that 800-year mark. I mean, elves usually, according to D&D lore, they're checking out, but dragons are like, cool, now I'm ancient. So they're outliving elves. You think that's not going to have a history or a deep embedded effect on a region? And truly, you should go beyond just the listed effects. I mean, how does that affect the economy? Does that affect trade routes? Because this it takes forever to go through this swamp. You can't see anything. Now we have to go around. Or do I have to hire adventurers now to protect our caravans? Like, these are certain kinds of questions that you should just the decision to go and live in this one spot vastly can change the landscape of a region.
Yeah, unless you're talking about like a white dragon. These are even white dragons to an extent, but these are intelligent creatures. They're NPCs. It's not just some monster of the week. You know,
Yes.
The way it affects the economy might be you have to give a third of everything you own every year, you know, a third of your stuff to this dragon.
Yeah.
They probably have some sort of cult, you know, connected to them. Tiamat is not the only one with a cult. That's just,
no.
You know, if there's an ancient dragon, if there's any being that has been around for 800 years or more, emphasis on or more, there's people that worship that thing without a doubt. And then you have like green dragons that like to plot and that kind of stuff too. So it's just, they're not just a Mad Lib monster to throw in. You could do an entire adventure around a dragon being the leader of some sort of organization. What does a creature like that want? What motivates a creature that's that ancient and powerful? And you know, like, I think you could do a lot more with them than how they're presented and what we've done a lot of the times.
But Josh, you bring up a really good point when you talk about things like paying tribute and really the scope that this beast, this creature, this really, frankly, NPC is going to have on your game. And I really like emphasizing what is special about the Dragon Horde. If this dragon has been collecting tribute for hundreds of years, this thing is going to have all sorts of really great items that the region that is paying homage to the dragon, it's going to be special to them. I mean, you look at The Hobbit, the Arkenstone was a great example. That was what was in Smaug's Horde, and that was why Thorin, I mean, it was one big reason why Thorin wanted to go there and reclaim the home. Perhaps the adventure can be about getting the item back that's special for whatever reason. Maybe it's a healing item, it's a, you know, whatever. The dragon wants it, so that's an obstacle. Sure, killing it's there, but it introduces goals and methods beyond just, oh, this is a fight. And I like that. It also personalizes everything because of that. And Josh, we could circle back a little bit. We talked about not having the dragon necessarily being a solo creature. The dragon probably is going to be above collecting the tribute themselves. So they're going to need some muscle to do it for them. They're going to need some El Mignons to go in there and get the job done.
The book has that built in. You really don't have to try very hard to find them. Right, black dragons, their minions tend to be lizard folk. Blue dragons like talented humanoids, which I think is just interesting.
Yeah.
Green dragons, they like goblinoids, ettercaps, ettins, kobolds, orcs, and yuan ti.
I love that the schemers.
Say that right?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Did I say that right? Can you just do me a favor and just comment? Just spell yuan ti for me. Let me know if I pronounced it correctly. Yeah. But yeah, the schemers.
I love that they have they work with as many people as they want to get it done.
Red dragons like chaotic evil humanoids.
Yeah.
Which is
alignment
fun.
still matters.
Yeah, exactly. White dragons are like kobolds, so that makes sense that the most boring dragon likes one of the most boring creatures.
Ooh, there you go. Just as we were putting together some of our notes for this video, you had offhandedly said, I don't know how much you thought about it, but it does feel like modules and things do tend to present dragons, all dragons, as white dragons in that way, because they tend to be the lone wolf when you look at some of these dragon types. Don't do that. It's not as fun.
I feel like I need to address something that some people are probably thinking. Like, if you came to this video looking for tactics for a dragon fight, that's not exactly what we do in creature features. I'm just going to give you 3 quick points. 1, dragons should not land right in the middle and fight your parties. We already talked about that. Obvious reasons. Don't let them do that. Use it. They're going to use every advantage that they have. Flight is one of the biggest advantages. 2, have the dragon fight in the lair. Dragon fights are very interesting if it exists in the lair. Lair actions and just the beauty or brutality or just weirdness of a lair adds so much to a fight. So definitely have it exist in the lair, unless there's specific reasons for it not to happen that way. And then 3 is what we were just talking about. Add minions. That could be anything that we just mentioned as far as the recommended ones, but we've also talked about minions before. It doesn't have to be something that's listed here. You could grab something if you don't want to increase the CR too much. Maybe throw some reskinned blights in there, or just regular ass blights. But
it would talking fit with about some of them,
it would.
Yeah.
We were just talking about white dragons, right? So maybe you have an ice blight. Use a needle blight, or it's like a needle
shards
blight
of ice.
shooting.
Yeah,
Exactly. Your imagination is the sky's the limit, especially with things like blights. Reskin them and have fun with it.
But yeah, so even if you are looking at things like our friend Lee was talking about, how things are kind of simplified, and maybe the fight doesn't quite land the way you're hoping that it would land. If you're combining all of these elements where there is a significant creature like a dragon that has affected a region for hundreds of years and collected heirlooms and powerful magic items, the story is just so rich and vibrant. And even if the fight isn't quite as much as what you hoped, I mean, the victory, the glory, the effect on the region, it's just there. It's just there. It's not just completely contingent on, I had to make this the most epic fight you've ever had because it's a dragon fight and I'm the dungeon master, and so I fudged dice rolls and ignored hit points and did all these things. There's just authenticity oozing out of its pores when the story and the combat and everything is in sync. I don't know. I think this is the way dragons are supposed to be handled, and they just require just really not that much thought. It's just kind of like tip that domino over, and it's just all these other things just start rolling and your world comes alive. I don't know. I think that's the way it's supposed to be, Josh.
I have to say I agree. I really don't have anything to add to that. The story is, it's what makes dragons special. It's every little thing that's connected to them. Speaking of little things that are connected to them, that sounds like it could go in a different direction, but I'm going to keep that because that's funny.
Yikes.
Minions, right? This is insane. We talked a little bit about blights. If you want to see a video where we only talk about blights, click on the one that's on the screen now. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Fantastic.